Casting tooth. Excellent. Checking with you, Ken. Can you see my screen? That says
Yeah,
little.
but you're still showing it in a browser. Is that what you want?
I think that's what I'll do because I don't know how to do
Okay,
it. Yeah. So that's what we'll have for now.
it works.
It works. It'll be good. But I see that there is participants. I can see them coming in. Attendees. Yay. Welcome
Yep,
everyone.
16.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Happy Wednesdays. I know it's 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central for me. If you could, as you're coming in, as everybody's trickling in, go ahead and pop in the chat where you're tuning in from and also your role, your title. That would be great. Where you're tuning in from, and then also your title. That would be great. I can see that there's people heading on in. Excellent, excellent. Austin, Texas. Woohoo. Looking for any other ones. Who's free? Arkansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. Shop teacher. Awesome. Thanks, Ken, for sharing your role. We'll wait just like a minute or two more as people come on in. Arizona, Leadman Concrete, nice.
Looking great.
HVAC instructor. Oh yes, I recognize some names here too, because I know that we have people who are interested, but also some customers, some Interplayers joining us today. Home Builders Institute, Michigan, yay, not too far. I'm Minnesota. All right, should we give it like one more minute, Ken?
I would.
Yeah, I know, as people are heading on in. HVAC, Rochester, New York. Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Feel free. As people are coming in, if you're just coming in, we're just sharing a little bit of our roles and where we're tuning in from before we're going to get us kicked off and started. Probably right around like 12:33 or 12:34 Central Time. Excellent. Thank you, everyone who has shared so far, shared where they're tuning in from and their different roles. Appreciate you guys being here. All right. I think that's good. Should we get going, Ken, do you think?
Sure, let's have at it.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If you are looking for how to use virtual reality and 3D simulations in your CTE classroom, you're in the right spot. You are with Interplay right now with me and Ken, and we're going to go through just some introductions and such, but appreciate you being here on this Wednesday afternoon. So my name is Cecilia Carr, and I work on Interplay Learning's education team, and I've been on the education team just over 2.5 years now. And before Interplay, I was an educator myself, taught for 6 years, and I have my master's degree in learning design and technology. And I love working with our different education partners, whether it be secondary, post-secondary, all across the board. So that's a little bit about myself. And I'm tuning in from St. Paul, Minnesota. That's where I'm headed out of. And yay, we got virtually everywhere. Lovely. And I am so honored to introduce Ken, and he's going to introduce his role and where he's tuning in from. Ken Midgett from our team. Go ahead, Ken.
Thanks, Cecilia. Yeah, hi, everyone. I am Ken Midgett. I am the Plumbing and Industrial Maintenance Market Director here at Interplay Learning. I'm also a former CTE instructor from Eastern Pennsylvania. Master plumber's license for 46 years, business owner ×2 for 23 years, just a little under 13 years as a distinguished CTE educator. I won 2 national teaching awards. And I actually use this product in my classroom that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to share some of those experiences with y'all and give you some insight how it can work. Looking forward to talking.
Yeah, exactly. We are so lucky to have Ken and his wealth of experience using Interplay, but also with his CTE classroom work and being on our team. So thank you so much, Ken. And I know we shared a couple different roles. We have some instructors here, we have some teachers, maybe some different like CTE admin and principals here as well. So really appreciate you sharing your roles and for being here to learn more. We're going to be able to dive right in. Hope you're having a great time, maybe wrapping up your school years, or maybe you're still going. But we're going to get started right away with how VR and simulations can really be impactful. Thinking of your students, I know we have a lot of instructors in the room. So thinking about how students really remember about 90% of new material if they're learning it through experience. And we know with skilled trades, it's hands-on, it's applying and being able to do. So being able to take that VR experience and have them do that in a safe, engaging learning environment, it's really going to increase their retention, their competency, and also their engagement and their motivation. So simulations are very powerful and the VR components, but we also know that video is also very prevalent as well. Thinking of your digital first students and those short videos that we know they scroll through, we know that about 97% of educational professionals believe that video is essential for students' academic experiences. Being able to mimic that one-to-one mentorship, those short micro-learning bursts, and the strong foundation. Because first they need to understand maybe heating and cooling theory, Ohm's law, what is a multimeter, how do I use it? Being able to incorporate not only the simulation experience, which Ken is going to talk to you lots of different examples and ways that it can be powerful, but also having some video content as some foundational knowledge as well. And thinking about videos have always been used, but maybe VR is a little bit newer of an idea for the educational context. But knowing that historically it's been used successfully with aviation, for surgeons practicing, and with different flight simulators, it's not a new concept in those career training programs. It's been used in these high-risk occupations for many, many years to mimic that real-world application. So being able to take that and translate it over to the skilled trades and make it more accessible for K-12 programs, for higher ed programs all across the board. Being able to have educators turn their classroom into that virtual job site and allow learners to practice their different kinesthetic learning and that full immersion and being able to practice hands-on. Because just like you have a pilot practicing on a flight simulator, you also want different learners to be able to practice before they're hands-on with different lab components and such. But I'm sure you're thinking, this is all great. These are all really great benefits, but how do we put it together? How do we use it in a course design for a CTE classroom and for the skilled trades and for your instructors, which we're going to get into, and being able to list off those different best practices and those ways that it's been implemented. So I'm going to hand that over to Ken to start to list off a little bit of a menu of what we're going to look at here today.
Yeah, hello everyone. We're going to go through some of the ways I've used this, and I want to throw this out there that the methodologies and your delivery with this is really just limited to your imagination. These are the ways that I used it in my classroom, found it to be effective, and students loved it. They ate it up. So there's synchronous, asynchronous, formative assessment, student-driven instruction, teacher-driven instruction, and enrichment learning. So those are the things we're going to cover as we move forward through this presentation.
Mm-hmm. And before we get into those 6 different ways that Ken just detailed out, first we'll review a couple specific benefits that come with the student experience using VR and simulations, and also come with the instructor experience using VR simulations. So starting with the student.
So yeah, first of all, simulations, whether they're being done with a headset, as you see in this picture on this slide, or they're using their iPad or a desktop or a Chromebook, they're highly engaging. It's not something that somebody can walk away from and let it just go by itself. You have to be interactive with it. So that's the first thing. So that automatically ramps up your engagement. Because of its ability to be able to be repetitive as much as the learner wants to, it really sinks home the comprehension and the retention of the content that's being learned. And we're providing something that works for just about everybody. Learning disabilities, students that have challenges, they're going to be able to utilize this and be able to learn. And you'll see as we go through this further that there's better ways that they're learning, things that you may not really consider happening with simulation learning, and the ability to increase their lab time. So those are one, and I'm just going to add one more on there, is that when you have students in your program, they get banged up, they in a sports environment and from their home school, and they can't participate in the lab because they have restrictions, or they're just ill or whatever. This also opens up that opportunity to keep that student engaged and keep them on track. So that's another thing that's very beneficial for this.
Mm-hmm.
So synchronous learning, this is a great program if you are in an environment where you teach primarily remote, or if you're in a hybrid situation. This works really well. I had it in my program during all the COVID stuff, and it was a savior in that situation. But using it as homework instruction that way, and also you could just keep very, very collaborative work, right? You could have them one person do one simulation, or one person do one learning, one do another, have them talk to each other and give a quick summary on what they learned. You're knowing right away as an instructor that they're getting it, right? So synchronous side comes in very fancy, very good. And it also works in a situation where you're going to have a whole class on when there's a snow day or an inclement weather day. It works great for that as well.
Yeah. And I'll just add on with some conversations I've had with our different customers as well, with the teacher benefits that I've heard consistently with being able to implement Interplay, is when students, the wear and tear on equipment and using up consumables, and being able to have students practice in the simulation first so they can make those mistakes, right? Before they blow a fuse, before they're using up conduit or refrigerant, what have you, because those are all dangerous components. So that they can practice in the sim first, that's really helpful for the instructors, because it's that extra layer before they're going in and they're having that hands-on. Because we're not replacing the hands-on, we're just being able to have that layering so they can have that extra practice and feel more comfortable. And like what Ken was describing, scaling out instruction, right? Maximizing that time. Because Ken, I'm sure you think of your days being a CTE instructor, there's one of you. I mean, some instructors are lucky to have teacher's assistants or like really good ratios, but that's not always the case, right? So being able to maximize that instructional time. You have some students working on simulations, some are with you in the lab. It allows for really maximizing that instructional time. And to your point, Ken, what you were saying with all those different ways of using Interplay, one being that synchronous learning that you started to introduce, right? And being able to use that for whole group instruction. So I'll have you, Ken, do you want to add on any other ways synchronous instruction can happen with Interplay?
Yeah, one more thing is that when you're doing this from a online perspective and you're giving instruction, you can really pivot and style this to exactly what you want it to be. You're not etched in stone, and you're also teaching something. I think one of the biggest things that this offers that you can't do synchronously with traditional education is that you can actually teach somebody the how, like how to solder a
Mm-hmm.
joint, how to put two pieces of pipe together because of the
Mm-hmm.
simulation aspect. So you can teach that and give your own flavor as an instructor along with it. So you can be going through a simulation and modeling it for them to see it. And then you can also say, and now here in the industry is where you would never put your hand on this pipe because it's going to be burning red hot because you just soldered it. Or, don't put water on it right away, or anything that you want to add in there that you would do when you're doing a real live demonstration in your lab. And you'll see that it dramatically changes those demonstrations too. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I hear from instructors as well, is being able to open up the door for them to practice the procedure and front load that, and being able to have that opportunity that wasn't available before. So being able to talk about that asynchronous part as well.
So this was probably the thing that was a pivotal moment for me to see this, really test this and use this way that I'm going to describe to you. So the asynchronous learning, obviously, it's they're doing it on their own, right? So think of homework, think of a flipped classroom, right? Which is what I'm going to dive deeper into that discussion, which is kind of what I did, and the value and benefits to me as the instructor, and the real benefits to the student about how that worked. But them being able to take their time and go through this and really learn the steps so that they're clear with it and understand what they're supposed to do. So when you do your demonstration, those aha moment, the real demonstration in the lab, those aha moments are just like happening. You can see all the pistons are firing because somebody actually are yelling out, and you're going to do this next, right? So they already know what the next step is because they've already done it kinesthetically on their laptop or their iPad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of pretty cool to watch that situation. And the other part of this that's very powerful is when you do it in the homework or the flipped classroom, whatever terminology you want to use. I have found that my lecture time was reduced by about 40 to 70%, depending on the difficulty of the topic, right? So what did that do? That automatically created more lab time. And that's when, that's when your students love you when you're in the lab. They don't want to be reading a book. They don't want to be filling out paperwork. They want to be putting their hands on equipment or at least doing something with their hands. And that's what I found. So from a productivity perspective, it really increased the productivity because they were going out there watching a fast demonstration and then immediately going to work when we would do these flipped classroom things and the asynchronous side. It really worked well in my program.
Yeah. And really thinking about like increasing their confidence too and their comfort levels. And I think of a story working with one of our partners in Minnesota, and I was interviewing a student and he was showing me he was working on an interplay simulation. He's like, it's so great because I can see exactly what I'm about to do before I go off into lab. And it's so powerful just to hear from him that experience of like comfort and confidence, and they can front load that. And to your point, Ken, too, that's going to maximize your instructional time and allow you to do less lecturing and have those short micro learning bursts and those mini lessons and have them get to the doing, right? Yeah, exactly.
And the other value to that is and it's just a value across the board with simulations is safety, right? Safety is a big deal in most CTE programs. Some programs you just get a burn on a cut on your finger. Some programs you lose your whole arm if you make a mistake, right? So
Mhm.
that's critical to this, and that they can learn very safely. And when I say that, I want to talk about just for a second about when I say safely, I'm not just talking about the safety, the actual safety factor. I'm talking about the ability to just go in and keep learning without feeling insecure with asking questions. You always have that
Mhm.
shy, introverted student
Yep.
that may or may not be afraid to raise their hand when you're doing a lecture. And they're the ones that are coming to you afterwards and asking you a question where, everybody could have benefited by that question, but that
Mhm.
student's afraid to do it because they think it's a quote, stupid question, end of quote. This cuts right through all that because they're able to get a lot of their questions answered. So that's
Yeah.
there's both sides of that safety thing, that, the brain
Mhm.
side of just humanistic, and
Yeah.
then the actual physical aspect.
Yeah, that emotional safety and that like comfort level and confidence too. Exactly. I appreciate you bringing up two halves of that safety, Ken. The physical
Mhm.
safety, so they don't blow fuses and be able to go through that, but also they feel really taken care of and understood too on what they're able to access. And then they feel confident about that next step because you're going to have different needs all across the board for your learners. And speaking of needs all across your learners, right, then comes in formative assessments, which I'll let you speak to as well, Ken.
Yeah, so lots of times when I would assign a given course, um, and talking about reducing this lecture time, what I would do to confirm information was understood, and we were in a space where I felt it was okay to go forward. We did these formative assessments, and we did them as a group. So I would cast the knowledge checks up onto the Promethean board, or the Promethean board, and we would answer them together. Right now, okay, some may or may not get that correctly, but I'm watching their faces as they're answering, and knowing my students, I'm knowing what their interactivity is and knowing where they are. And of course, I could just add all my own questions in. So that's another way of using this as a tool, and it's already done. Teachers are always, I know I did. I robbed and pilfered every single piece of resource I
Mhm.
could get my hands on. And this is just another resource that's already done for you. It's vetted, it's made
Mhm.
with professionals. These aren't just made up questions. These are part of the content they learned, and they're being done professionally from an educator's view and from the technical aspect view, the discipline. So very
Mhm.
critical in that component. And the other two kind of that we're going to do next kind of blend in with this as well, just doing it a different way. You can move on unless you have something to say.
Yeah, I'll add on just a little bit before we move on to those other two. Um, just like Ken was saying, thinking about your instructors and the instructors on the call here too, being able to have a ready-made resource that has those assessments built in that you're able to use and just like have at your fingertips, it's going to help you have all that data and evidence already ready to go. And that's going to save you time because as Ken was saying, with his time being a CTE instructor and my time teaching, you're limited on time and being able to have that ready. So equipping your instructors with that resource makes it really easy too, and allows you to differentiate your instruction based on your student needs, like we were talking about earlier. But I'll move on to those next two that are remaining here. Starting with the student-driven instruction.
So student-driven, you can use it a couple different ways. You can actually have a lot of fun with this one. You can use it as a formative assessment. And I had close to 60 students in my program, 30 in the morning, or the lighter numbers in the morning, bigger numbers in the afternoon because of cooperative education and workforce development. But I would use the higher level students because it was a multi-level lab, levels 1 through 4 and grades 9 through 12. I would grab a junior and say, put a headset on, and grab another junior and put a headset on that were the same level, and then put the lower level students in teams, and then split the board in half and bring up 2 different simulations that were close to the same time and just say go. And the students in the audience, the learners, if you will, they had to guide the one with the headset on to get the simulation done. And we had those simulations in the assessment mode. So if that higher level learner that was wearing the headset made a mistake, i.e. stuck their hand in a box, electrical panel, didn't lock or tag out a device before they went in, they got knocked out and had to start over again. So then you could hear all the learners groaning and moaning because, they missed that step. So that was really cool. Created a lot of competition, fun learning. They were very competitive, extremely competitive students that wanted to, see who could get what done first. And then we actually also did them with doing both the same simulations. So that was very interesting too, especially in the assessments, because you don't know exactly what's going to come up when you go in assessment mode. It's not guided. You have to know the content. And this worked great as a formative thing. And for a lot of reasons. One, this higher level student is acting as an instructor. He or she's still student and is student driven, but in the real world, that person's the journeyman and these are the apprentices in plumbing and pipe fitting, right? So this really kind of synchronized exactly what happens in the real world with the older level student helping. That's one. And two, you immediately knew what group of students weren't doing the homework because they didn't know how to do simulation. They were telling the person with the headset on to do the wrong thing. They're losing. That's when all the gloves come off and they really start becoming competitive. So great way to utilize the program. Student driven. You could just sit back and kind of facilitate, keep them from killing each other when they're losing. And just let them have fun with it that way.
Yeah. And I love that gamification with a purpose, right? And that competition and what you're describing, Ken, is similar to what they're going to see in the workforce because they're going to need to work in teams with certain things that they're doing and skills and being able to collaborate and work with each other. And we know when students mentor other students and have that ownership, that's the greatest role as a teacher when you're facilitating, right? And being able to see them take off with it as well. So I love hearing that example, and I'm going to definitely be sharing that out with more of my customers that I'm working on with too. So then with student-driven instruction, also pairing that with, like we've been discussing, and I'll let Ken speak to the teacher-driven instruction pieces.
So it's kind of the same atmosphere, but now the teacher's wearing a headset, right? And I just play like I'm a learner, right? You have to guide me through the instruction. The difference is with me doing it, now I can ask the why. Well, why is this the next step? Why am I doing? So now we're really diving deep in the learning capacity. Yes, it's running a little bit slower because I'm demanding more information from them, but I'm also making them think. So, why do you think this is the next step? Okay, we did it. All right, we got to that one. Why is it that way? Why couldn't I just done this first? Right? Why couldn't I just solder without cleaning? What's so important about cleaning? So this is the time to really, it's giving them the information over again, right? Repetitive aspects of it and getting them to really think. So if you look at this whole thing, if you look at the video side of the component, that is the what and the why. and then the simulation is the how.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But here I'm using in the simulation, yes, it is the how, but I'm also intertwining other parts of it by getting the what and why out of them and making them think. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the little bit different aspect of it. And they would have a great time, because they would think that I wasn't going to take my headset off and just immediately turn around, and they're standing on the desk making a face, and I just immediately turn around by lock and see them and catch them, So we had fun that way too.
Yeah.
It was a great time.
Yeah. And I like how you're describing too, Ken. It really allows those higher order thinking skills and critical thinking and troubleshooting and being able to defend the why and have evidence to that. They can't get out of that. They can't guess their way through that. They need to know exactly why you're being able to operate that through, and how fun for them to see you go through the simulation and be able to have it casted up on the board and to have that full experience. I mean, being able to have everyone engaged and working through that together. And then lastly, the sixth way that we included was with the different enrichment learning opportunities. And I'll start that off, and then Ken, you're going to speak to the competency-based learning. But this is similar to what we were describing earlier with the formative assessments and being able to differentiate for students who are struggling with certain concepts, being able to have response to intervention, and also allow students who are ready to be challenged. A lot of the conversations I have with instructors I have varying skill sets that students have all across the board that are coming in. Some know these things, some are already here. It allows you to assign different assignments based on their needs, and you can use those assessments to drive your instruction and to really be able to progress monitor and attend to those different skill sets. But I'll let Ken add on to how competency-based learning really adds into this enrichment learning component within CTE.
Yeah, so competency-based learning is everybody's learning at a different pace, right? So we need to be able to provide for that. So this is one of the things that does that. But I'm going to expand on this a little bit further. Lots of times I would, instead of me doing the demo, depending on how difficult the demo was, I would have an older level student demonstrate to the level ones, right? So I would say this to them, and they would say, "Oh, I haven't done that for 12 months or something." I'd say, "Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
Go ahead. We'll do it tomorrow. Go in and watch the simulation first
Mhm.
before you do the demonstration." So it was great for that as a resource, and because they didn't want to make a mistake in front of their peers. That was the
Mhm.
big deal. They did not, when they were doing that demo, they don't in front of those when that level 3 or 4 is doing the demo in front of level ones, they don't want to make that mistake. They want to make sure every single step is accurate and be
Sure.
prepared for the questions too.
Mhm.
So it worked great for that aspect. It worked great for somebody who maybe just didn't quite get it, or somebody that's asking me to come sign off a task and to get to step 3 out of 15, and you could just tell they're going to choke. And you
Mhm.
say, "Hey, you know what? Just go back in and watch a simulation one more time before you practice. Come out here, practice 2 or 3 times, and then find me, and I'll get you through this sign off."
Mhm.
So it really worked great in those applications. It's just a resource that's always there. You know, in my school was a very busy program. Instructional aides were segmented across several labs, so I didn't have one in my lab all the time. So
Mhm.
not having that extra resource for maybe the learner that has some challenges, this is great. That just put them down in front of this. And those
Mhm.
typically are the students that are fidgety and have a hard time focusing. This solves that problem as well for them. So there's really a lot there that will help you, and most importantly, help the learner at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And allow them to engage in really meaningful practice that is based on their needs. And so they don't feel like they're doing busy work or whatever have you. They're doing something that's going to allow and meet them with where they're at and be able to push them forward. And so, thinking of those six ways that we just reviewed with asynchronous learning, synchronous learning, formative assessments, enrichment learning, teacher driven instruction, student driven instruction, and all those different examples and strategies that Ken has, being able to have that. Now you're probably thinking, okay, how does that work in my program? What does this look like in practice? We're going to share a little bit of one of our customers and being able to hear from them, because we have so many talented educators and programs leveraging Interplay Learning. So want you to be able to hear from them as well on what they're seeing and how they're using Interplay with these similar strategies to what Ken just had. And so we're going to take a look at hearing from DJ, who's an HVAC instructor who has been using Interplay Learning for the past just about 4 years. And he is out of Pennsylvania at Indiana County Technical Center. And so just some highlights before we watch a very short video hearing from students and admin describing their use of Interplay. They optimize time, like we've been discussing. They decreased their program costs on materials and equipment. They also improved on their learning retention and also student outcomes. And we're gonna go into detail of those specific outcomes as well. So let's go pop over. And we're gonna be able to hear from them. And hopefully all our audio is working here.
Just the way it's set up is really cool. It's actually fun to use. In the shop, we have a limited amount of space. We can only fit so many furnaces and ACs, and we have almost 30 students. But if somebody's using a machine I would like to use, I can just hop on a 3D interactive and do the exact same thing they're doing, but online.
The simulations that Interplay offers prepare students for real-world situations that they actually have to use higher levels of thinking to figure out what's wrong with something. That's what we're trying to build here, is give them those skills for when they walk out this door that they can go problem solve.
Quite frankly, we fell in love with it. The students enjoyed interacting in all the programs. DJ was able to assign different modules without the expense of using a lot of our consumables. So the students got valuable experience, and then when we were able to pull them and put them on live equipment, they were able to perform at a much higher level.
I would definitely recommend Interplay Learning to other instructors in HVAC program or any trade program. It gives them access to material that maybe you couldn't give them before.
All positives in terms of how it can be used, how the students can interact with the programs, how the instructor can assign the different modules, and then the practice and the outcomes that comes from using the Interplay system. So I would highly recommend it.
Just the way it's set up is really cool. It's actually...
And apologies, it is the first Wednesday in Minnesota. So if you're hearing a tornado siren, that's me. How bad is it coming through, Ken?
We can hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself just for a second.
I'll talk through some of this while you're doing that. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with this that people don't actually realize, there's no question that CTE is expensive, right? Resources, your consumable supply list, and depending on what you're teaching, it can be really expensive. Like if a student goes in and on an HVAC unit and blows up a board, that could be $1,100 out the window. So having that ability to practice on that situation before going on a live board, and the safety, obviously you thinking about the safety implementation as well. They're learning what the steps are for safety before they even go into a real environment. That's one. And two, if you have your lab has a smaller footprint, you just don't have the room to bring the equipment in, or the trainers or the materials for everybody to be doing it at the same time. This really is a lifesaver for that, because you can organize this in such a way that, as you can create competitions. The ones who gets the highest grades, gets through the sim the fastest, they get to be the first one to do it live in the lab. So there's all these things that you can do to use this as a tool to get them there and utilize the space that you have, right? Because you can't make it bigger unless your school was under renovation or something. So it's always something you have to deal with. The other thing is the consumables, thinking about, cut and measure pipe. Well, pipe's expensive. If you measure it wrong and cut it and bring it to me to sign off on it and it's wrong, we just wasted a piece of pipe. So getting them into the practice of understanding how to do that and how to join different pieces of pipe, wonderful way for that, instead of them just wrecking material and it goes in the scrap pile, because it's just too expensive to throw away. I'm sure everybody is resonating with what I'm saying right now. Can you talk now? The siren's still going.
It's still going a little bit, so I'm just waiting for it to kind of go through. Thanks for your patience.
That's all good. So some of the students that ITC, you can see 100% graduated at least one industry recognized certificate. In Pennsylvania, NOCTI is a big deal in PA. So that's in Indiana, PA. So it's DJ is saying that this is contributing to his students getting proficient at the NOCTI score. So I don't know what more you could ask for as an instructor out of your students. If this is helping, this is a slam dunk for a resource. And then he's also attributes that 81% of this is continued in HVAC. Their students are staying in the program and are getting jobs in post-secondary ed. So one of the other things I'll share with you that I used it for, my program had a huge cooperative education workforce development spin to it. That was the thing to do if you were a student in my lab. If you were a learner, it didn't matter if you're level 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you got to a point where you showed the employability skills that you needed and you had the behaviors that I would witness in the lab, I would try to get you signed up and have you out there working. And this was one of the best tools for that, because I may have sent some of those students out that didn't get through the entire program of study list, but I can take some of these simulations and have them do them. And then when they do come into my program, we can get them to do the task quickly enough and get signed off, or they can do it with their employer. So it worked both ways, but I was able to utilize this in that capacity as well. I didn't have to drag the kid back in for one specific task that I wanted them to get done, because I could assign a simulation, let them do it. They could then choose to do it in front of the employer, or on their normal day that they come in, they could do it in front of me and I could sign them off. So it really, really worked terrific for that aspect.
Yeah, strong connection with workforce and that alignment into what they would be going into, and allowing you to have that set of resources and those simulations so they can practice it and get it checked off and be able to prove their knowledge with that. And thank you so much again for your patience with the lovely tornado siren. Would love to hear some questions from our attendees here. Feel free to use the Q&A button, because we have some time dedicated at the end here to answer. I've been kind of monitoring the Q&A and we don't have any in there quite yet. So feel free, this is your time now to ask a few questions and for us to answer them. Also, just so you can see up here, if you scan that QR code, if you're interested and you're like, man, I really want to learn more, thinking about my program, what I could be able to look at for Interplay, you can be routed over to a place where you can put in a demo request and be connected with somebody on the education team that would be able to help you out for specifics for your program. But really, now is the time. If you have questions, we'll wait a little bit and be able to see. Oh, here we go. Yay. Thank you, Jessica. Is this the exact same simulations embedded in Cengage MindTap? Great question, Jessica. So we originally partnered with Cengage many years ago. So those are our simulations from about 8 or 9 years ago. So yes, we did work with Cengage, but our simulations now have been updated and there's more of them. And we continuously are updating those simulations based on industry standards, new equipment types, refrigerants, NEC code. So they're not the exact same. They're going to be, they're kind of, if we think like Windows 1.1, now they've gone a lot of iterations past that. Did that answer your question, Jessica? So not the exact same, but we did. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question, Jessica. We have Patricia here. Are there in trainings for students or support line they can reach out to, even instructors, if they have questions or concerns? Definitely. There is trainings for the students. There's a help center. We have a whole ticketing system. And then when you work with Interplay too, you have a designated account manager that is able to assist you with questions. And one thing I guess I'll tease too is we even have SAM, which is our skilled advisor and mentor. And we're starting to be able to have some beta education users use that. So students could ask a little advisor, hey, why am I putting this piece of equipment in? And they could respond as a teacher would in the Socratic way. So to answer your question, Patricia, I hope that, yeah, there is the help center that can help with technical needs. We have account managers that can assist, and instructors, if they have questions and concerns, they talk with the account manager and help center and our whole technical team. I'm thinking of Andrew and Simon. We have a great team that's US based here. I see Ken, how is it compared to ZSpace? ZSpace is great for augmented reality. We are that full like procedural virtual reality where they're going through different steps. And I guess I'll let Ken, if you have something to add on to kind of that difference between ZSpace and Interplay and kind of the different deliveries.
Yeah, I'm not sure if ZSpace has actually taken the learner through guided instruction, whereas a simulation is going to do that. You know, there's two ways when a learner enters a simulation, whether they're doing it on a laptop, desktop, or have a headset on, there's two modes. There's learner mode and there's assessment mode. So the learner mode is all of the things they need to touch with their finger or using their mouse on the laptop side or iPad side are glowing a specific color. Ironically, that orange that you see there right above the Q and Q&A. And it also has the questions defaulted answers, right? So it's telling them the steps and it has the default answer of what they need to answer it correctly to go to the next step. So that is teaching that instruction. And then when they go in the simulation, all that stuff is turned off, right? So that gets a lot more challenging because if they make any mistakes, whether they're a safety mistake or a mistake within a sequence of ops, they got to start over, and it feeds them a different process. It feeds them something else. So the first one might have been solder a 90-degree turn in a vise, right? And then you're gonna go through those steps. And then the second one might be solder a vertical section and do the bottom joint, do the upside down vertical, right? So it's going to keep spinning them into making them think. So it's truly like a test that it's pretty hard to cheat with, right?
Yeah. That's a great description. I appreciate you, Ken, going into that detail too, because ZSpace is very cool with like the dissection and like blowing things up and like looking at things, whereas we have those different procedures and construction trades too. So great question. And I see, Jessica, as well, you're talking about the VR training, like looking at quotes and being able to do that. That's where you'll be able to get in touch with one of our account executives by putting in that demo request. We'll be following up after this webinar with the recording and getting you in touch with that links to get you connected. You did mention, Jessica, about the VR trainer, and something that I wanted to make sure we didn't fail to mention, the VR is the most immersive component, but it's great. We also are accessible on desktop, laptop, and tablet. There's multiple access points. We sell the software, and we work really great with the MetaQuest headsets, so we'd be able to go into that. So Jessica, someone will be following up with you and getting a meeting so you can be able to meet with them about your program specifics, enrollment, all of that. We'll be able to speak with you about your specific needs. So appreciate you.
And with that thing with the headset, one of the big differences is that the learner is immersed in the room. So when a learner puts a headset on, and I'm not lobbying and saying that you should only teach with a headset or you have to have a headset to teach. I think I want to be very transparent here. The difference, though, is that is the closest representation of what the real world's going to be. So as an example, if you had to do something on the unit that's called the condenser that sits outside of your home for an air conditioning or heat pump system, and you had to get down low to the ground, let's say a foot off the ground to use a meter, you are going to do that with that headset on. You're going to get down on your knees and you're going to be using your hands with a meter and testing the voltage on something. So it's as close as you're going to get. When you're setting a toilet, you're going to be, lifting the toilet up and putting it down in place, putting a water heater in, lifting up a tankless water heater, hanging it on the wall. It's as close as you're going to get to what it really is like to do the work. And that's the part that's super critical and important here on the headset side.
Yeah. And I think our last question here, unless there's a couple more popping up, and of course we'll kind of see how much more time and other questions we have. Someone was asking about, is there new content areas that we're looking at? And Sam was asking about automotive. And yes, we have automotive coming at the end of 2024. We're really excited about that. And we're also taking a look into some different industrial applications and some advanced manufacturing pieces. So automotive at the end of 2024, and then some advanced manufacturing. And Ken, if you want to add any more color or context into those newer areas, great.
Yeah, I would say as we go into 25, for those of you that teach mechatronics or mechanical controls, you're going to start to see PLCs and SCADA come in. you'll see those types of things and different a little bit more what you would see in the industrial side of maintenance. You're going to see that come into it. So from an education perspective, you can probably utilize some of that. You're probably going to see on the plumbing side, you're going to see some more commercial come in 25, some more commercial plumbing and some more pipe fitting side. And we're also doing our steam boilers. That's a big one. If you have steam on your program of study that your students need to learn that, and you don't even have a steam boiler in your lab, it's a great thing for that. I mean, you can really utilize the tool and you can get them signed off on it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, really appreciate Samuel as well as Patricia and Jessica and Ken. Thank you for asking your questions. We love to be able to hear those. Like I mentioned, after this call, you'll get a recording of the webinar and then an area, a link to be able to get set up with account executive based on kind of where you're at and your needs and everything. So please click through that. We want to connect with you. Maybe you'll get to speak with me if you're in that area. But we have a whole amazing education team that I work with and account executives that would be happy to connect with you. I think if there isn't any other questions rolling in, I know that we're just at that 45-minute mark or so. Really, I'll give you just a couple more seconds if there's any more last-minute questions coming in. We appreciate you guys being here. Samuel, industrial commercial coming, perfect. So glad you exist. Oh, we're glad you exist too. Yeah, I'm really excited, especially being in Minnesota. There's a lot of advanced manufacturing happening in Minnesota and different programs that we want to be able to help out in. We can see how this could be powerful in those content areas. So thank you, everyone. Ken, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure to add on?
Nope. Just wish we could do this in person.
I know, right? Yes. Well, I'm excited. I got to be with Ken at some different conferences. So maybe there'll be an education one I get to be with Ken coming up soon. Thank you guys for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesdays. Appreciate you being here and your participation. And like I said, there'll be emails. We're excited to follow up with you as needed. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I think I'm in control to say goodbye or end it. Double checking.